Hey folks, welcome back to our Dice Tower preview. I'm Mark, and today we're taking a look at Tiny Epic Dungeons. Tiny Epic Dungeons is brought to you by Gameland Games. It's for 1 to 4 players, ages 14 and up, and games range anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. The town is under siege by an evil boss who lurks deep in the mountains. The players form a party of adventurers who must delve deep into the dungeon in order to clear out the halls of goblins and minions, contend with magical traps, and defeat the evil boss. But time is of the essence. The players must move quickly through the dark corridors and complete their mission before they are lost in the dungeon forever. So your goal here is to search the dungeon, defeat the goblins and the minions, all while searching for the boss's lair. Once all the minions have been destroyed, then you must smite the evil boss and bring order back to the land. So, depending on the player count, this will determine how you set up your dungeon deck. You'll be seeding the deck with encounter cards and, of course, the boss's lair. Standard dungeon tiles will form the top of the dungeon deck, and the middle will be a combination of encounter tiles based on player count and standard tiles. And then finally, the bottom part of the deck will contain the boss's lair. So you will need to do a fair amount of dungeon delving to find the boss, and hopefully you've geared up by that time. And then laying the entrance tile down in the middle of the table. You'll also put a ritual token on this tile. This is where all your heroes are coming into the dungeon to start. Now around this tile, you're going to be placing face down cards from the deck that you just created. These will be discovered as you explore the dungeon. And there's a ton of different icons in this game. Luckily, they give you a handy reference guide to help guide you through those. They are very intuitive once you play even just a couple rounds. Now, each player gets a hero. Your two main resources are health and focus. You're going to be using those things a lot. You'll be adjusting those up and down throughout the game. And then your main abilities, as you'd expect, you've got strength, you've got agility, and you've got intellect. Those are all going to be vital when you're performing checks as you're moving through the dungeon. You've also got your movement through the dungeon as well as your defense. You've got a free action that it shows as well as what you recover when you rest. Now at the bottom for this particular character, Moonblade, you have the dagger, and she has the ability of a lockpick. But you will be able to fill these slots with different items as you discover them throughout the dungeon. Now, the flame track is something you want to keep your eye on throughout the game. Not only does it track different events and things that are happening, but it is a bit of a race. It is a countdown. You're trying to keep your flame lit, and the flame might go out. If it does, the darkness comes around you and you fail. But the thing here is that there are ways to affect this track, either negatively or positively. So after each round, it will move down, but then dice rolls can cause it to move down even further. Or defeating minions can move it back up. So lots of different ways to manipulate this track, but throughout the game, you do want to keep a very watchful eye on it. And around this track is where you'll be storing goblins when they come out to play. There's 4 slots for goblins, and once you have a 5th goblin, well, another way to lose the game. So you have to make sure you manage them before they overrun the dungeon and you. And as you'd expect, there's some other cards here. You've got the goblin cards, obviously. There are several different types. You've got the minion cards. Minions are a little more difficult to deal with when you're fighting in the dungeon. And important note that minions do have to be eliminated completely before you can engage with the boss. Now, there's also loot and spell cards. These are hopefully what you're searching for and finding in the dungeon, enhancing your character, preparing for that final battle. Now, there's a series of bosses, all different types, and you're gonna be shuffling them up and drawing one at random, placing it face down. And you'll put the boss token on top of that card, ready to have it come into the dungeon. Now, remember, I am using a prototype version of the game here, so I have tokens, but they're gonna have miniatures for this game. I'm super excited, and I'll show you what they look like. I've got some renders, but they look fantastic. I can't wait to use them in this game. Now, this is a dungeon crawl, and as you'd expect, there are dice. You'll be rolling this dice frequently as you perform certain checks in the dungeon, like disarming traps, or casting spells, or attacking. Lots of different things as you move through this dungeon. Now, depending on what skill you're using, it will determine how many dice you get to roll. And there's an enemy dice, so when you do go into battle, you'll be rolling their dice as well to see how well they defend and so forth. Now, on your turn, you're doing 3 main things. You're moving, you're performing one main action, and then you can perform any number of free actions. So all your movement and actions can be used in any combination on your turn. Each tile counts as one movement. If you move into a tile with an enemy, you must stop and deal with them. And if you enter a previously unexplored room with a goblin, you take 1 damage. Or if it's a minion, then you take 2 damage. And as you flip a tile with a goblin or encounter symbol, then you will add that monster to the room and their card to the flame track. Keeping in mind, a 5th goblin in the dungeon will cause you to lose the game. All throughout the dungeon, again, you're going to be performing checks. And some of the main things you're doing here, you have location actions like searching a room. You're going to be opening treasure chests. You're going to be disarming traps. You're going to be casting spells. And of course, you're going to be resting. And resting is very important because you will burn through health and focus quite frequently. Focus is really fantastic. It's used for spells. It can also help you augment some of your dice rolls and things like that. But you have attacking as well, right? So you're using your strength and so forth. Lots of different ways to navigate and deal with all the threats in this dungeon. So as you move through this dungeon, interact with the tiles, perform the different actions, you're going to be rolling your dice against different ability checks. The tile or the card that you're using for equipment or the spell you're using will show you exactly what you need to roll against. It could be strength, it could be agility, or it could be intellect. So based on that skill, will determine how many dice you get to roll. You'll roll that dice and you'll pick one of them for the main value. Now, sometimes the dice will result in a plus value, which you can add to the main one. Also, there's lightning bolts, which can recharge your focus ability. So, as an example, let's take a look at a trap tile. You move in, you immediately see that there's a question mark. You have to roll against this, and you have to beat that score of a 6. So, I choose my strength because I can use 3 dice. Question mark allows me to pick any skill I want. So I take all 3 dice, I roll them. However, I roll a 6, but I did roll also a +2, which allows me to succeed in not getting hit by this trap. Now, the trap is still active. I have to burn one of my main actions to try to disarm it. But if you do succeed, then you get to draw a loot card or a spell card. But the downside here is that my intellect only has 1 die. So there's lots of trade-offs based on who is interacting with the different types of rooms. Some characters might be better at disarming traps. So you want to work together. It is a cooperative dungeon crawl after all. So much like disarming a trap or avoiding a trap, you're going to be doing very similar things as you cast spells, as you attack, open treasure, search rooms, things like that. So you're rolling dice against a skill to see if you succeed. And like in a sword, you're rolling against your strength, or the spell, you're rolling against your intellect. Spells are neat too because they have line of sight, they have distance, they can travel between room and room. Some can even go around corners. So lots of interesting things with spells for sure. But the other neat thing about loot and your armor and gear is that there are sets. Yes, as you create sets, you get multiple bonuses for doing so, adding more power to what you can do. And as you engage in battles, you're basically rolling against the enemy's defense value, and you're hoping to do damage. Now the goblins, you only have to do 1 point of damage to destroy them, and for the minions, they actually have a health track. Now, both types of creatures are going to give you a reward at the end, and it's listed on their card, and you'll just follow along. Now also, there is the enemy die, which was rolled when you're attacking, and sometimes that will just affect the flame track. Sometimes it will allow them to counterattack you and disregard all your defense. Lots of interesting things, but they will get a chance to hit you unless you've destroyed them in your attack. Now, the flame track, there's a couple interesting things here. As you hit a goblin face on this track, well, a new goblin appears in the entry room. And remember, again, you don't want more than 4, otherwise you lose the game. So you got to keep track of those goblins and shut them down. And there's a glowing eye icon. If you hit this one, then the minions and the goblins get to have an action. Basically what they're going to be doing is moving closer to the nearest hero and attacking, but at the bottom of their cards will list what that action is. So you finally discovered the boss's lair. Well, the boss doesn't appear until all his minions have been destroyed. The minions are based on however many players there are in the game. So you'll mark that off on the back of the boss card. Once it has been marked off, well then the boss appears and you can start to attack him. Now, interesting thing about the boss is there is a ritual icon on the boss, and you may have to lure him into a ritual room so he gets marked with the ritual, so you can cause his health to drop below that ritual number. Sometimes there's 2 of those that you have to find or more. So bosses are very difficult, but you can lure them out of the room, taunt them, so to say. But each boss has different locations around them, and you move your token or your miniature off the board onto the boss, and there's an entry point on the boss, and then you move around and affecting him in the different actions that he performs. The bosses are also very powerful and can hit multiple heroes at the same time, so you hopefully have geared up well enough to defeat this boss. So you've defeated the boss and saved the land. That's your main goal. So many different ways to lose the game though, but really the one way to win is destroying the boss and all his minions. Alright folks, just a reminder once again, this has been a Dice Tower paid preview, and everything you've seen here has been in prototype form, so keep a close eye on the campaign for any changes that still may occur. Now with that said, I'm pretty excited to see these miniatures in person. A tiny epic game with miniatures, yeah, that's pretty cool. But, there is a lot of neat decision making in this game as you rely on each other, as it truly is a cooperative game. You rely on each other's different abilities and skills to make it through this dungeon, and you try to stick together as much as possible, but also discover the dungeon as quickly as possible as time is running out. Alright folks, if this looks like something that would be of interest to you, I'm sure they'd appreciate your support. So I think that's it from me, and until next time, we'll see you at the table.